So, um, so you had this kind of this career at um Salesforce, and we talked a little bit about like your transitions, but
Mhm.
how did you decide to leave? So first, I guess the first transition was from a big corporate to a
Mhm.
startup.
Mhm.
So what was the thinking then, and what was the plan?
Yeah. So after Salesforce, I had gotten the director role, and I was managing a team. And um, the team that I was on went through a bit of a turbulent time. And my thought process was a bit more, um, not closed-minded, short-sighted, I guess you could say. So I the solution to my um, unhappiness at work was, basically, it wasn't like, oh, let's go find another job at Salesforce. It wasn't like, I applied to a few other startup jobs to see how I could do it, to see if it would go. And I actually applied to Waymo way back then. And the recruiter, very lovely woman, said, you've never done a startup before. Are you sure you could handle it? And it's like, what? What? Who do you think
Wow.
I am? No, it was whatever. But so that ended up not working. And then, um, I was with my wife on a small vacation, like a week vacation, and we had decided to go do the travel thing again.
Hmm.
And so this was round two when did the travel thing, but this time with my then girlfriend at the time, and we went to Bali. And this time we actually lived in one spot for a while. So we were in Bali for 4 months, and we got a spot and chilled out there for a little bit. The other difference between this one too is it wasn't just pure travel. I was working on projects, so I was like building
Right.
apps and like coding away and doing
So
all that
did you
stuff.
just leave Salesforce and go on this like coding stuff on your own?
That's it.
And was it
Wow.
like consulting, little projects,
No,
things like
no, no.
that?
It was me messing around. Like I was building Python web apps. Like I was just like I wasn't doing anything. I was just like exploring my own curiosities. I started a small side project, small business that was a good passion project, but it made a little bit of money, but it wasn't much. Um, but yeah, I left Salesforce because also I was pretty sure I wanted to leave there, but before I
Right.
got my next job, I wanted to do the travel thing. And my then girlfriend, now wife, and I were just excited to go on this adventure together. And
Yeah.
so we ended up doing that. It was fabulous. Um, like I said, I started a small project where um, I started making those 3D mountains, like the 3D relief mountains that people sometimes have, where
Hmm.
it's like either like CNC'd out of wood, and it's like literally like a physical
Ah,
people are holding.
yeah.
I wanted to make those, but in bronze, right?
In
And so
bronze. Okay.
yeah, so it's a big long process, but it dealt with a lot of 3D printing and 3D modeling, and then I made them over in bronze. There's a whole website.
In
It's called
Bali.
well, that's
Wow.
why that's where I started learning the process, because it's manufacturing, and so like I had no idea how to make these things in the first place, and so Bali kicked me off, and I learned all the things not to do when I was in Bali, and then when I came back to California, it was a little bit easier.
Right.
Um, the website for that is terramano.co. If anybody wants to go check those out,
Terramano.co. We'll add it
yeah,
to the notes.
yeah. Anyway, so I ended up doing that, and it didn't really work out. It didn't really work out like I needed it to. And so I started applying to jobs, and I've learned in my career that the way you go get a job is you don't apply through the front door, like ubers.career.com. You hit the ground and you go emailing. You go cold emailing and cold intros to people. And that's what I
Yeah.
ended up doing to my next role over at Digits. I hit up both the founders. I gave them the quick pitch. They were into it. I leaned back on my Salesforce name, and I went for it. And I guess I should say this too, because I think it's kind of interesting for a data audience. As I was leaving Salesforce, I had a mentor tell me during a one-on-one, "Hey, Greg, I think you should shoot more. You should shoot for more than being just the data person." And I
Mm.
go, what do you mean? And she goes, "You're advising a lot of the decision makers. So you'll come up with an analysis and you'll recommend to product what they should do. You'll recommend to the GM what they should do, but you're never the one making the actual decision. And so if you want to get further along in that realm, I think you're going to have to go outside the data world." And so I was shook after that. I almost like, who am I anymore? I don't, what is my purpose? What is my personality? And so since I learned that, since I had that realization or insight from her, I have explored data adjacent careers. And that's what I specifically explored within the startup. I told the founders like, hey, I did growth over at Salesforce. That's no problem for me. Like that's going to be good. Frameworks, all that other stuff. I'll do that in my sleep. What I want to grow into though is I want to grow into the COO track. So that doesn't mean I want to be your COO. That means I want to point that direction and start to go that route. So help with the monetization model, help with RevOps, help with stitching together all our SaaS applications, be the Zapier and automations expert within the org. Do all your product analytics, stand up your ETL process. So it's much, much more than just doing data analysis. And so that's what I ended up doing at Digits, which was a fabulous learning experience. I mean, the team was extremely smart, great engineers, great founders. And it was a lovely time. And I ended up being with them for 3 years. So it was a solid time.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
then,
great.
but then I guess throughout this whole time, you kept up like the YouTube, the content creation, things on the side?
Yeah, good question. So, no, like I said, at the beginning of COVID, I did like 2 months of the pandas stuff, right?
Right.
2 months. And my play was the SEO play. And so I stopped after 2 months and I did nothing, right? For the first like 3 months, there was no traffic. And then in month 4, after I did all that stuff, then it was a little bit, then it was a little bit more, then it was a little bit more. And it peaked up at 90,000 uniques a month for the site, just off of pandas tutorials, which was pretty sweet. And I tried getting B2B sponsors, but the problem was that I picked the wrong content. And the reason why I was wrong is because remember in the days before any LLM support, if you had a question on coding anything, you'd Google it, go to Stack Overflow, copy some code, and then leave, and then just go somewhere else, right? The same thing was happening to I optimized it for a click in, click out. Nobody stayed on my website. Nobody, no emails, no retention, the bounce rate was absurd. No time on everything was not great for that. So, if anybody wants to talk about that, that's a whole different topic. So did that. And then in January of this past year, over that time, I'd culminated it was 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, which whatever, I wasn't even paying attention to it. It was like maybe $1 a day in AdSense or whatever. It wasn't anything. It was so little that I would have to let 2 months build up before I hit the payment threshold and they actually send me the check. Right. But then I saw the Hacker News show Hacker News blog post for LangChain. And I was reading the comments. I had no idea what it was. I read the comments, and the comments were weirdly optimistic. And Hacker News comments, they're like usually like freaking coming with their pitchforks for anything new. And I read that and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I had already started to mess around with the OpenAI API just a little bit. And then I looked more deeply into LangChain and I was like, holy cow, this is solving all the hard parts of working with the OpenAI API right now. And I just thought to myself, what Pandas is to data analysis, LangChain seems to be to the LLM world.
All right.
And I was like, oh, yeah, this is great. And the cool part about language models is that the barrier to entry is super low. It's not a deeply, deeply technical topic. And people are figuring all this stuff out in the beginning, like just to start. And so I made my first video, just a Loom freaking video, nothing going on. And I put up on YouTube. It was like an intro to LangChain or like LangChain 101 or whatever. And that next day, I was getting like 3 or 4 subscribers a day just off my old content from 2 years ago. And then I got 16 new subscribers after that LangChain video. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's sweet. And then the next day it was 25. I didn't even put out a new video. It was 25 the next day. I was like, wait a minute, what? And so I started pumping out videos and it went to 45 new subscribers in a day. And then it went to 100. I was like, what is going on here? And I'm telling my wife, I go, babe, this doesn't ever happen. It's like, I've been in this content game for long enough that this does not happen like this. And so I would say I put my foot on the gas pedal about 30% as much as I probably should have back then. Cause like, if you remember the early 23 hype, I mean, that was just nuts. It was just all over the place. And I started doing stuff. I was full-time on it. I was like making content. I was really just following my curiosities, like exploring these new things. Right. Like even the concept of email generation it was novel back then.
Right.
And it was take something about the company, take an email template, and it will output a personalized. It was novel. Right.
Yeah.
it was a wild time. Anyway, so I'm doing that, and it peaked at 550 new subscribers in a day, which again isn't a ton, but it was really cool. It was transformational at that time for me. And so now in August of 23, we're at 33,000 subscribers, and I've told myself that it doesn't get interesting until you hit 100K, and so that's the next milestone. But we'll see if we want to get there or not.
Yeah, it's on its way.
Well, I need to put out more content for it first. And so y'all didn't ask about the evolution of how I approach content, because that's changed a whole bunch too. And what was me just doing tutorials like on Loom, I asked myself, Greg, if you wanted to take this to the next level, like if you really want to give this a good shot, what do you need to do for it? Right. And so there's a whole list of things that I thought about, but that's a different topic, and I don't want to jump into it if y'all don't want to take it there.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's go there, because I think that's part of the process. Because that's
whatever you want.
Mastery. And I think at some point we also just, like you mentioned, like having a plan before diving into like doing the YouTube stuff full time.
Yeah.
Want to hear about that too, but it sounds like they're connected.
With the YouTube part?
Yeah, like you're I mean,
it's all connected, you know. I mean, everyone's is a list of experiences. Like I said at the beginning, I think my content has resonated well because I spent so much time doing stakeholder management at Salesforce, learning what are their goals, what is going to be impactful at the business, how do I spend my energy? And then it was that same thing at the startup, but at that point, it's like there's no corporate crib that you're in. You're up against the raw world, and users may or may not like your product, and you got to figure out what the heck you're going to do. Right. And so between all those things, I think it set me up into a good position to be like, okay, what are cool, impactful projects that I want to do to showcase these language models? Which areas aren't explored that I think will do well? And then you combine that with my scrappy Python skill. I tell people all the time that it won't be performant and it probably won't be secure, but you're going to be able to read it like plain English, because I need it simple. If I'm going to teach a technical topic, I need it dead simple. So it's heavily commented. That's why I love Jupyter Notebooks, because the markdown in between, all that good stuff. And so did that combine that with the YouTube stuff that I did a couple of years prior? I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, y'all and I, you two and I are talking right now, but like by no means do I consider what I've done a success at all so far. Like there's a long way to go to get to where I want and for my goals. And so it almost feels a little premature to be talking. And I wish that this podcast was like in like 3 or 4 years. And maybe we'll
do it.
Yeah.
Round 2.
Yeah, we'll do round 2. But no, man, it's a journey. It's fun. Yeah, it's a journey. It's fun. Yeah.
So what are the things that just at a high level, like from the early videos to now, like you mentioned, if I want to get serious about this is what I need to do differently. What are the key things? Yeah.
So one of my key learnings was through a creator coach. His name is Jay. He's been great so far. He made it pretty clear to me, like, hey, Greg, you're not going to out expert anybody. Like, you're not going to out expert anybody. That hit me hard. Number 2 is, Greg, you don't want to be in the game where you're trying to say that your list of 10 things is better than someone else's list of 10 things. That's not a good place to be in as a creator, right? And so he's really helping me work on what he calls the premise, which is, who are you and why do you do what you do? And how do you position yourself so that you're competing against no one else? It's just you. So there's a bajillion AI newsletters out there. There's a bajillion AI content and bajillion AI tutorials and all that out there, right? How can I formulate my premise that others won't say that they do, right? And so he's helping me really, really narrow in on where that is. And I'm not quite ready to share exactly what it is because it's still getting figured out. But think of it as, how do you create a trailer for you, Greg, about the journey that you're on and what you do? So he's been helping me a lot with that, and it's been really nice. I'll let you know how that goes afterwards. But then it's like also little things. It's like, how do you upgrade your setup? How do you sound better? How do you just do small tactical things? I was talking to one audience member really early in my journey, and I go, hey, so I haven't really put that much time into my setup. What do you think? He goes, well, there's two types of audience members, Greg. So there's the ones who don't give a shit, and there's the people who really care for the good production. He goes, I care for good production, so I think you should really end up setting up. So like little things like that. And then just recently, I started working with an editor, because if I really looked at the content process, like what takes the most time? Freaking video editing, right?
Yeah.
And in the day of good YouTube is edited. There is a story, right? And so I'm writing the scripts because that's the content. That's my bread and butter. And I'm getting better at that. It's not by no means there yet, but the tactical editing, I needed to outsource because I wasn't good at it and it was taking a lot of time. And it degraded my content a little bit because, it wasn't as good. Now, there's some people that'll say, oh, I want the content to speak for itself. And if you're Andre Kaparthi and you can put up a video about how to do a transformer from scratch, yeah, of course, you're going to get 3 million views and you're going to do great. I mean, that's fabulous. That isn't the type of positioning that I can lean back on, nor do I necessarily want to. I'm trying to position myself in another type of way. And so with that comes the need for a little bit more editing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So cool to hear like the breakdown of these steps to like take it to the next level. Cause you're like at this, like you mentioned, like at this interesting, hopefully in between phase where the channel and the content has started to take off in this new way, and it's going to land somewhere, and you're figuring out how to strap rockets to it so it can land farther.
That's exactly it. Because if I'm really harping in on the content side, I mean, content is an equation, right? You have your audience funnel, but then you also have your content operations funnel. How many ideas can you get? How many of those ideas can you execute on? And then how well do those ideas actually end up doing, right? That's the content side. But then you have your whole like audience side, which is the discovery. I think Jay Klaus puts it as the audience platforms and discovery platforms, and then your relationship platforms and owning your media. It's so deep, but the operator in me enjoys the game of it all. Like it's fun. I mean, I wish that it was paying just a little bit more right now so I could I could go to a party and like not have to like front, you know what I mean? Kind of like front, like how things are going with it. But no, it's beautiful. It's a fun time. And I have an extremely supportive wife who helps me throughout the process.
Great. All right. And also maybe one last thing that except YouTube, like how should folks follow you and hear more about you, what you're up to? And maybe in potential get in contact with you.
Yeah. Sometimes people say, Greg, let's connect on LinkedIn. And I'm like, why? Like, what? Like for what? That's a little bit of a jerk thing to say. But no, I don't really do LinkedIn. So I would say Twitter is good. And I think if you search hard enough, you could find my email. I don't necessarily want to give it, but you can. I mean, my DMs are open on Twitter, and they will be for the foreseeable future. So just hit me up there.
Cool. All right, so let's wrap this up. Thank you for your conversation, and it's really been insightful. And our guest today has been Greg Kamradt. Greg, thank you for being part of the Craft, and thank you for listening to the Craft podcast, and for all of you. So for more links and information about this episode, or to listen to more episodes, you can search for the Craft podcast by Daniel Tedesco and Michael Du on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. And see you next time. And until then, keep crafting.